Right, let's dive straight into this explainer and unpack what is basically the ultimate dream for so many people, transforming a modest Northern Beaches property into a sprawling forever home. You know the exact scenario, right? You find this charming, slightly rundown three-bedroom cottage, and immediately your brain starts picturing a stunning second-story addition or maybe a massive light-filled rear extension. But as we're going to explore today, matching up those big buyer expectations with the area's incredibly strict geographical and statutory realities, well, that is often a massive wake-up call. Buying a home based entirely on what you think you can do without actually knowing what the land and the council will legally allow is a really, really dangerous game. We have a ton of ground to cover today, so here is our roadmap. We're going to hit the extension dream, cracking the council rules, going up versus going out, constraints that kill plans, the real cost to build, and we'll wrap it all up with a bulletproof pre-purchase checklist. Let's get into it. Starting off with Section 1, the extension dream, ambition versus statutory limits. So a lot of buyers fall head over heels for a property's potential, but that dream hinges entirely on the rulebook. Let's ground this with some hard numbers, okay? 8.5 meters. That's your absolute maximum wall height in most R2 low-density zones on the Northern Beaches. Now, just to put that into perspective, a typical single-story home already sits at around 3.5 to 4.5 meters high. So the second you add a full upper level, you are instantly pushing roughly 7 to 8.5 meters. That leaves practically zero wiggle room for a pitched roof. If your block is even slightly sloped or sits a bit low, you might literally hit that absolute height ceiling before your design even gets off the ground. Another absolutely essential metric you need to understand is FSR. That's floor space ratio. Basically, this puts a hard cap on your total floor area, and the ratio is typically 0.5 to 1. What does that mean in plain English? Well, if you have a 600 square meter block of land, you are strictly capped at 300 square meters of total floor area across the whole property. So if the existing house you just bought already eats up 180 square meters, you've only got 120 square meters of entitlement left to play with. Sure, that's meaningful space, but it puts a hard mathematical limit on just how massive that double-story extension can actually be.
And then we hit the 35% maximum site coverage limit. This is a crucial rule that dictates exactly how much of your actual land can have a building sitting on it. This is huge if you're planning to build out into the yard rather than up. You can't just pave over the backyard and throw up a giant rumpus room, because that 35% cap includes all the existing structures already on the site. Moving on to Section 2, cracking the council rules. Let's translate this bureaucracy and see how these numbers are actually enforced by the post-amalgamation Northern Beaches Council.
Okay, so you really need to understand the stark difference between the LEP and the DCP. Think of the LEP, the Local Environmental Plan of 2021, as your absolute ceiling. It sets the statutory hard limits for your zone, your height, and your floor space ratio. But then you have the DCP, the Development Control Plan of 2022. This is the fine print. The DCP layers on these highly specific, granular rules for things like setbacks from your neighbors, site coverage, solar access, and street character. So often, buyers look at the LEP, think they're totally clear to build, and don't realize that the fine-grained constraints in the DCP actually make hitting that maximum ceiling practically impossible without drastically altering their design. Knowing all of that, let's look at Section 3, going up versus going out. It's time to pick your path. Let's break down the hurdles for each option. First, going up. A second-story addition is awesome because it doesn't increase your ground footprint, so those site coverage rules are way less of a headache. But going up means navigating incredibly strict upper floor side setbacks. Why? Because the council wants to protect your neighbor's privacy and sunlight. Plus, in a lot of streets, that upper floor actually has to be recessed back from the front facade, so it doesn't look like a massive, bulky box from the street. Now what about going out? Extending the ground floor forces you to deal with an entirely different set of headaches. Northern Beaches blocks are notoriously long and narrow. Sometimes we're talking 15 meters wide by 40 meters deep. The DCP will often demand a 6 to 8 meter rear setback. When you apply an 8-meter setback to a really narrow block and then factor in the rule that 20% of your site has to remain a permeable surface to handle stormwater, well, your buildable backyard shrinks incredibly fast. Which naturally leads us to the million-dollar question. Every ambitious buyer asks this the second they realize how messy council approvals can be. Can I just extend without a DA? Well, it comes down to two completely different timelines. The fast-track dream is the complying development route, known as a CDC.
It's handled by a private certifier, it takes a breezy 6 to 8 weeks, and it lets you completely bypass the council DA. Sounds amazing, right? But, and it's a massive but, it has incredibly strict eligibility criteria. If your property hits certain planning overlays, you literally cannot use a CDC. You are instantly forced down the other path, the development application, or DA. The DA route requires full council approval, it drags on anywhere from 3 to 12 months, and it is highly subjective to character assessments, overlays, and yes, even formal objections from your neighbors. That brings us to Section 4, Constraints that Kill Plans. We need to expose the hidden hurdles that can turn what looks like a real estate bargain into an absolute renovation nightmare.
Listen closely to this one because this is the single most frequently overlooked constraint by eager buyers, bushfire-prone land. If you buy in suburbs that back onto bushland, places like Terry Hills, Mona Vale, Bayview, or Ingleside, you will very likely fall within a bushfire-prone land overlay, and that mandates incredibly strict construction compliance. We are talking non-combustible cladding, ember-proof subfloors, and heavily bushfire-rated glazing on your windows. If you happen to be in a flame zone, the required materials are extreme. This compliance alone can instantly tack on anywhere from $80,000 to over $150,000 to your total build cost. And beyond the money, it might just outright ruin the architectural design or the lovely timber aesthetic you had your heart set on.
But bushfires aren't the only trap. You absolutely have to investigate these other plan killers. Heritage and character overlays, they might mean your second story isn't completely refused, but it has to be designed to look completely subservient to the original home. Foreshore setbacks are another massive one. If you're near tidal waterways, your building line might be pushed a full 40 meters back from the high water mark, completely ruining your floor plan. Slopes over 15%, that'll trigger very expensive geotechnical reports and push you straight into the slow DA pathway. And finally, strata and community titles. Extending common property in something like a villa or a townhouse is virtually impossible. You would literally need a unanimous special resolution vote from your neighbors, plus a registered bylaw change. Good luck with that.
All right, Section 5, the real cost to build. Let's anchor the budget and face the harsh financial reality of construction on the northern beaches in 2026. Look, the financial reality here is pretty stark. Construction costs on the northern beaches are among the absolute highest in all of Sydney. It's a mix of huge demand, access nightmares on those narrow beachside streets, and just the premium quality of builders operating in the area. A basic 60 square meter ground floor extension, you're looking at around $4,500 per square meter. So a modest rear addition is going to run you between $270,000 and $350,000. But going up is significantly more expensive because of the structural complexity involved. A second-story addition of 80 to 100 square meters will cost $5,500 or more per square meter. That balloons your total project cost to somewhere between $500,000 and well over $700,000. And please don't forget the professional fees just to survive the DA process. Architects, certifiers, engineers. That's another $25,000 to $45,000 right there. These numbers show exactly why you can't go in blind. That seemingly cheap, unrenovated house is absolutely not a bargain when a full second-story addition is going to easily cost you upwards of $700,000.
Let's wrap up this explainer with Section 6, the pre-purchase checklist. Let's bulletproof your buy. We're going to equip you with a real, actionable roadmap so you don't buy a lemon. I want you to follow these exact steps in order before you exchange any contracts. Step 1. Hop onto the NSW planning portal and check the LEP zoning and your floor space ratio. You have to know your baseline numbers. Step 2. Commission a Section 10.7 planning certificate from the council. This is a legal document that discloses all the planning constraints, overlays, and risks on that specific block of land. Read every word of it. Step 3. Engage an architect or a building designer for a feasibility sketch before you exchange. Seriously, paying for a half-day architectural sketch to see if your dream actually fits on the block could literally save you hundreds of thousands of dollars in catastrophic mistakes. And here is a massive pro tip to put in your back pocket. Call the Northern Beaches Council's Duty Planner line before you exchange. Use this. It's a completely free insider resource. You literally just call them up, give them the property address, and ask specific questions about the planning controls. It is incredibly useful for getting absolute clarity on things like heritage or bushfire constraints that might not be totally obvious just by looking at a map overlay online. And best of all, you can do all of this before you sign a single piece of paper. So I'm going to leave you with this to chew on. Next time you're standing in an open home this weekend, looking at a property that seems suspiciously underpriced, ask yourself, Is that Northern Beaches bargain actually hiding a $150,000 bushfire compliance trap? Or maybe a nightmare strata restriction? Or a completely maxed out floor space ratio? Make sure you do your due diligence. You have to truly understand the reality of extending before you commit your life savings to the dream.